back. I'm Kendal Burton. This is Newsmaker Live. My guest, Mr. Guy Joseph, former Works Minister. Before the break, we were talking about some of the accusations leveled at you during the last sitting of Parliament, in which you were accused of handing contracts out to 3 of your brothers. You were explaining that during Thomas, no contracts were
issued during Thomas. And the records are there at the ministry, you know. So I know when people come out with this information, it is deliberately intended to mislead. Everybody who worked submitted bills. Some of the bills were revised, some of the bills were chopped, some of the bills were adjusted based on the supervision of the works that was done. And there was a special team at the ministry headed by the then permanent secretary who reviewed every one of the bills that came in to the ministry. So, as I indicated, I want them to show me the contracts that were issued to those persons. Not because they are my brothers. And like I said, I didn't have 3 brothers who work. I had 2 brothers who worked. And they have worked, they have been equipment owners and operators long before I came into government. So it is not something, and I want to ask, because I've always been puzzled by this. If I am in politics, my brothers are not supposed to work. And when I'm not in politics, they will never get a job. So why should I be in politics? Because if I had taken a brother who is a teacher, or who is maybe a farmer, and given him a road contract, I would understand the level of criticism. But I have brothers who are contractors, who are equipment owners. They didn't go and rent equipment from somebody, you know. They own the equipment. And I can tell you, as I speak to you today, that some of the cleanup works that was done in Bexon was done, the contract or the job was issued to people who are not equipment owners. That is during the trough. And the equipment owners were working for non-equipment owners. That did not happen during Thomas. What happened? All the equipment owners. So, as I indicated, every contractor, and there were contractors. When Dr. Anthony came to Parliament after Thomas, and he called out the list of names and he started mentioning, he conveniently skipped a number of names to whom the amounts would have been a lot higher. And then I asked the question, were these names skipped because of the political affiliation? Because I was not involved in equipment hire during. Every engineer on the ground engaged equipment during Thomas. It was impossible for me as minister to be involved in everything that was happening. We were begging people with equipment to come and work. We were searching everywhere for equipment. So this information there about them getting a contract, I would love to see the contract. I can tell you my brothers got contracts, but they tendered for these contracts. I can recall 2 contracts that they got. One of my brothers got a contract at the end of the airport in Viewfort. And he got the contract because the first person he tendered on the project, he came second on the list of contractors. The first contractor got sick, had to travel, and could not execute the project. So it reverted to the second person on the list. That is how he got the project. And one of my brothers, the other one, got a contract at Tapio, and he tendered along with about 4 or 5 other contractors for the job, and it went to the tenders board. So these are the only contracts that I am aware. Other than that, it's regular desilting, where you give each equipment owner, if it's 100 meters, if it's 40 meters of work, it was spread out, and the records are there to show. So the information given there is deliberately intended to mislead.
But you would appreciate that, the tenders board aside, you as the minister, there would be a perception that the minister exercises some sort of influence over the proceedings or the system that's in place.
But the work they did in Thomas, nobody needed to influence this. Because equipment was being searched for, and all the work that you're talking about, there is work that was done during Thomas.
And what about the desilting of the Ravin Poisson and the Vanna intakes?
The Vanna intake and the Ravin Poisson intake was prior to Thomas. That was to deal with the drought.
Okay, let me just clarify. At issue here is an estimate by the Water and Sewage Company, WASCO, that cost $65,561.72. Eventually, that figure was ballooned to $240,250. Yeah.
That is interesting. And let me give you the scenario why it is interesting. The Vanna intake and the Ravin Poisson intake had been decommissioned 1993 and 1995 respectively. Now we are talking about 2010. So in 2010, it would have been 15 years for the one that was decommissioned in 1995 and 17 years for the one that had been decommissioned in 1993. Now, if WASCO is saying that it used to cost $65,000 to clear these intakes, it would mean that they were clearing these intakes when they were in use in 1993. So the two of them combined together would cost $65,000 in 1993 when they were fully operational, and occasionally you would go in there and when some silt built up into the reservoir, you would clean it up. You are talking about something that was abandoned for almost 20 years, 17 to be precise. One of them had been turned into a fish pond. There was a pig pen just above, the one in the Vanna intake. Completely abandoned. When we went on the site visit, because of the extent of the work that was required, it was only a big excavator with a long ridge boom that could have been used to clean these areas adequately. And the report says that. But you see, I don't want to mislead persons. So I want to be clear. It says, and this letter is from the manager of WASCO, dated 24th March 2010. And I assume that this is the letter that the minister was reading in Parliament, because he promised to make it a document of the House. But up to this morning when I called Parliament, he had not made it a document of the House yet. Yet still, when I was minister, when I spoke in the House, and I said I want to make reference to the people who are being charged, overcharged on their bills in the calculation of VAT, I was asked, immediately as I sat down, they came, the clerk took the paper from me, photocopied it and circulated it. Up to a day like today, I have not seen a copy of what the minister was speaking about. But from my own sources, I was able to get some information. And I heard what he read, so I'm assuming that we may be reading the same document. If I am misguided, then when he makes it a document of the House, which I will always be suspicious of, because they waive documents and sometimes what they say is not what's there. But it says, the decision was taken by Cabinet to assist in the refurbishment of the above two all abandoned raw water intakes and pumping station previously used by WASA. You know how long WASA has not been around and is WASCO? Okay. And then it goes on to say, before the commissioning of the Millet Gravity Intake and the Sir John Compton Dam in 1993 and 1995 respectively, the responsibility of the excavation and the clearing of the intakes would remain with the government through the Ministry of Communications, Works and Transport. That is what the note says. And it goes on, there's a second one that goes on to explain the extent of the work. Now, I don't want to come here and spend time reading every letter, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to post it on the internet, on the UWP website. So anybody who wants to see it can go there and read the details and make an accurate assessment for themselves as to who is telling the truth. So to tell me that these things had been abandoned in 1993 and you going back and clear it in 2010 and that it should cost, the average cost should be $65,000. The issue has been raised about the rate for the excavator. The ministry is the one that produces the rate for equipment. From a 20-ton machine at $250 to a 30-ton machine in excess of $500 per hour. The ministry is the one that produces the rates, and I don't get involved in the rates. All the rates for work is set by the technical people within the ministry. But you know what? This Labour Party administration, they have tried on several occasions. They have called me every possible name to show that I've been corrupt, I've been this, I've been that. And so they are now manufacturing things, using it out of context because they said so much. They said so much about the Honorable Richard Frederick also. What have they been able to prove? 2 years into government, we were told U.S. Marshals are there waiting. And that's why I'm happy the Honorable Richard Frederick is taking the approach that he is taking towards this whole matter. Because the Labour Party must stop trying to malign the reputation of people with bogus information, out of context completely, to try and create something that is not there. Now, there's an invoice attached here. And the invoice is very interesting. The invoice is for $242,009.65. And if you see the items on this, so I asked my brother, I called my brother and I said, is that your invoice? He said, I've never seen this before. I don't know about this, so this could not possibly be my invoice. So I want to see the invoice that the minister spoke about in Parliament when he said he would make it a document of the House.
Okay, we're due for a break. Let's take that break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Mr. Guy Joseph, former Works Minister, and we'll take your calls. The lines will be open when we come back.